This day in sports history. It's June 19th, and on this day in back-to-back years, the U.S. Open was won by two of the most unlikeliest of golfers. It seems fitting that after J.J. Spaun won the U.S. Open last Sunday, that we'd be talking about two other unlikely Open winners. Spaun's only PGA Tour win prior to Sunday was at the 2022 Valero Open, so he wasn't exactly on anybody's radar to be hoisting the trophy by the end. Ed Furgol was also not on anybody's list of potentials at the start of the 1954 U.S. Open. In fact, Ed Furgol should probably not have really been a competitive golfer. When Furgol was 8 years old, he was climbing the ladder to swing on the playground monkey bars, but he fell off the contraption and he landed on his left arm, fracturing his left elbow. Now, his arm was put in a plaster cast, but it wasn't set correctly. So when the cast was removed, the bones had healed, but his bicep muscles had atrophied as a result, and several operations performed after that did not fix the issue. And the result was a permanently bent left arm that was also 6 inches shorter than the right. Not exactly the perfect combo for a golf swing. But Ed Furgol had started to learn how to play before his accident, and he developed a passion for it. After his accident, he had to find a way to actually do it. He strengthened other parts of his body, such as his fingers, his wrists, hands, and shoulders, and he developed a swing all his own. You're not going to find Ed Furgol's swing in any 5 lessons instructional book. It was unconventional and singularly his, but he made it work for him. The 1954 Open was held at Baltusrol in Springfield, New Jersey. And just like Braun this past weekend, Furgol's name was on the leaderboard from the start. He was 2 shots off the pace in the first round, the same after Friday's 18. By the end of Saturday's morning round, Furgol had taken the lead. When he came to the 18th tee in the afternoon, he still clung to a 1-shot advantage over Gene Littler, who was in the group behind him. The pressure may have finally gotten to Ed a little bit on the final tee. He hooked his tee shot into a copse of trees that made it impossible for him to hit his ball out into the fairway. Now, Baltusrol has an upper and a lower course, and as Ed contemplated what to do, he remembered that the upper course was not considered out of bounds, and so he carved an escape route out of the trees to another fairway that ran parallel. He hit a 7-iron to the fringe, ran his chip about 12 feet past, and rolled in a tough downhiller to save par. Littler still had a chance, though. His third shot to the par 5 left him with about 10 feet for birdie and a share of the lead, which would force an 18-hole playoff the following day. But his putt rolled past, and Ed Furgol won the U.S. Open with a 4-over par 284. This was the first U.S. Open ever televised, though it was not the wall-to-wall coverage we now have. Instead, it was just 1 hour of the final round that made it onto folks' new TV sets around the country. A year later, little-known golfer Jack Fleck pulled off one of the most surprising wins in a major tournament. The U.S. Open that year was played at the Olympic Club in San Francisco. Fleck was still working as a club pro in Davenport, Iowa, but he was giving himself 2 years to make it on the tour. 6 months into his 2-year window, Fleck showed up at Olympic. After the first round, Fleck was 9 shots behind leader Tommy Bolt. Round 2 took its toll on Bolt and he came back to the field a little bit. Fleck, on the other hand, tied for the best round of the day with a 69 to move into contention. Conditions continued to toughen up by Saturday for the 36-hole marathon. Ben Hogan led after the third round at 7 over par. Fleck was 3 strokes back as they went to the afternoon. Now, things were done just a little bit differently then as now. Now the leaders are in the final group or groups, but then it wasn't done like that. Hogan went out ahead of several groups, and that led to some weirdness. NBC was providing coverage that day, and when Hogan tapped in for par at the 18th to finish with a 4-round total of 287, Gene Sarazen, providing color that day, congratulated Hogan on another U.S. Open victory. It would have been his 4th U.S. Open win in 6 years and his 5th overall. And then, NBC signed off the broadcast for the day with golfers still on the course. Well, one of those golfers was Jack Fleck, 5 holes back. Nobody had given him a chance to catch the mighty Hogan. Fleck came to the 18th needing a birdie to tie and force an 18-hole playoff the following day.
Jack Fleck, an obscure municipal course pro from Davenport, Iowa, and that chance is still slim. He needs a birdie to tie, but he hits a beautiful shot from the rough, hole high and only 8 feet away. He strokes it perfectly, and it's in to tie the great Hogan for the title. And you can see now the strain Fleck has been feeling. From out of nowhere, a Cinderella man has bobbed up to challenge mighty Hogan as the top man in American golf.
That gave him a final round total of 67. In the Monday playoff, Fleck continued to surprise everyone by hanging with Hogan the entire way. And then he got a little bit of luck thrown his way, or maybe it's better to say that Hogan fell on hard luck. With Fleck up 1 standing on the 18th, Hogan teed off first, but he slipped on a patch of sand on the tee box and he hooked his tee shot into long U.S. Open rough. His next 2 swings only resulted in moving the ball about 5 feet. Eventually, he rolled in a 30-foot putt for a 6. Fleck rolled in his par for a 3-shot win.
Fleck has the title in his pocket. He sends a nice putt up next to the cup, and then without hurrying or wasting time, he taps it in. He beats Hogan 69-72, and from obscurity, he springs into fame as the Open Golf King of the United States.
The 9-shot deficit that he overcame in the first round is the largest ever overcome to win a U.S. Open. Fleck managed 2 more wins on the PGA Tour and contended again at the Open in 1960. Sadly, Fleck was forced to sell the gold medal he was awarded as a U.S. Open winner, using that money to try to salvage a golf course he owned in Arkansas. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, cologne, and many more personal care products in a large variety of scents, you're sure to find something that's perfect for you or that special someone in your life. Check them out at sterlingsoap.com. Even though we use terms in golf like sudden death playoff or classifying somebody who is having a really tough day on the links as dying out there, those are euphemisms that help color our language. But on this day in 1977, sudden death could have become a reality. During the U.S. Open played that year at Southern Hills Country Club in Tulsa, Oklahoma, during the final round, leader Hubert Green stepped to the 15th tee. But he was stopped by Tulsa police officers who informed Green that a death threat had been phoned in against him. Green decided to play on and, understandably, was a little bit rattled. He pushed his tee shot right, hitting a tree that kept it from going out of bounds. That was fortunate. He settled down enough to hit the green and 2-putt for par. Police officers in riot gear accompanied Green the rest of the way, and the cameramen covering the action were requested to scan the gallery for a potential sniper. Green made a 4-foot par putt at the last to win his first major by a shot over Lou Graham. Green humorously said a few years later that when he putted out for the win, he called the potential sniper a chicken, but he didn't say it very loud. On this day in 1988, a first-lap crash ended the career of NASCAR driver Bobby Allison, and it came very close to ending his life. It was the Miller High Life 500 at Pocono International Raceway. Bobby Allison was driving the number 12 Miller High Life car for the Stavola brothers, and he wanted to have a good showing since he was driving the sponsor's car at the sponsor's race. But just after they dropped the green flag to start the race, Allison felt a tire going down. He pulled his foot off the throttle to hopefully limp it back to the pits and get it changed out. But the cut tire went flat in a hurry, and it snapped his car into the wall head-on. Driver Jocko Magiacomo T-boned Allison's car. Once he was pulled from his mangled race car, he was taken to the local hospital, and it was thought that Allison had only suffered a broken leg. But when one doctor passed by and saw him on a gurney, he recognized the situation was a whole lot more serious than just a broken leg.
And the doctor, this old guy, comes down the hallway and, "Hey, who's with this guy? He's in trouble." And Judy said, He's got a broken leg. He was in the wreck at the racetrack. Got a broken leg. No, lady, he's in trouble. Said, I have to drill a hole in his head.
Well, he ended up with what they call a closed head injury, and he was like right on the verge of death.
He suffered a severe loss of memory and motor function. It took him months of rehab to recover just the ability to walk again and know who he was and those around him. He said, for 2 months, I could not add 2 + 2. I was conscious, but I didn't know who I was or any of those around me. The world was really mixed up for me. At first, I was unhappy that they'd let me live. He was released from the hospital after 108 days, and he never raced again. Allison's career was finished a lot sooner than he'd hoped. He won 85 Winston Cup races, and he won the championship in 1983. Bobby did live a long life, though, passing away at the age of 86 last November. And on this day in 1943, the NFL granted permission to the Philadelphia Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers to merge for a season due to the shortage of players during World War II. The team became known as the Steagles, and they played the 43 season as this combined team, finishing the season with a winning record, which for the Eagles was kind of nice, since they had not had a winning record since 1933. Now, they divided their home games between Pittsburgh's Forbes Field and Philly's Shibe Park. Who was the coach? Well, that's the funny part. The Eagles' Greasy Neal and the Steelers' Walt Kiesling were co-coaches. And like most football coaches, like all coaches, these two headstrong men did not do well with that co-coaching arrangement. The idea was for Greasy to coach the offense and Kiesling to coach the defense, but they spent most of the time fighting with each other, and yet they still won more games than they lost. Also on this day in 1986, Len Bias died of a cocaine overdose. He was 20 years old, and he had just been drafted by the Boston Celtics. I did a long piece in last year's edition about the events of the night before and the early mornings of June 19th. It's just such a sad story. I didn't feel like I needed to repeat it this time around. And in 2006, the Carolina Hurricanes won the Stanley Cup. It was the first Stanley Cup championship for the franchise and the first and still only professional sports championship won by a North Carolina-based team. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. A hurricane has never crossed the equator. Now, this is due to a phenomenon called the Coriolis force, and it's related to the rotation of the Earth. In essence, the force deflects winds in opposite directions in the northern and southern hemispheres, and it's what causes hurricanes and tropical storms that form north of the equator to spin in a counterclockwise fashion, and those that form in the southern hemisphere to spin in a clockwise motion. According to NOAA, only one storm has ever come close, and that was a typhoon back in 2001, which came within 100 miles of the equator in the western Pacific. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.